Hello, everyone. There's a sense in which we tend to get overwhelmed on our journeys because we're so focused on the difference between our work in progress and what looks like someone else's finished products. What do I mean by this? Well, I tell you what, in business, there is always someone who would have been further ahead than you, someone who is running an organization that is bigger than yours. And ideally, you should find this to be inspirational and aspirational rather than intimidating, knowing that if you benchmark, you can learn a lot from them and grow your own formidable institution in the process. But just so it doesn't look like, we had it all figured out off the bat, I want to share today three mistakes that I've made in the course of my business. Of course, there's several, but these three came to mind today. The first is this: right at the beginning of my business in the early 90s, myself and my husband, we hired someone to go and represent us on a project. Now, part of the reason why we hired him was because he was an engineer and we were not. I know we're in the gas business, but I'm a microbiologist by my first training, and my husband is a medical parasitologist. Go figure. Anyhow, we felt that because of the kind of business and partnership we wanted to get into, that it was important for us to bring an engineer on board. And so he spoke to a friend of his whose husband was out of job at that time, and we agreed to bring him on board. Now, a lot of things happened, but just suffice to say that we were putting him forward in technical meetings. We were sponsoring his trips to meet with the potential partners. And the young man actually just went and cornered the transaction for himself. I mean, we were quite shocked when the partnership agreement arrived. And rather than having our business name there, it was for him as an individual. And when he came back and we asked him about it, we were expecting that he was going to say it was a mistake. Actually, he got offended and asked why we would have opened his personal mail. I mean, it was a very interesting experience. So we had to go back to the board of directors, put the case before the board, and it was amazing the things this young man said, the kind of lies he spewed in trying to discredit my husband and I as the owners of the business, and all that. In fact, he went as far as saying that he was just bothered by the fact that we were acting like husband and wife. And the chairman of the board had to remind him that not only did we start the business, but we were husband and wife. Long story short, that was a serious burn. We tried to get the partners to change the agreement into the company name, but they were having none of that at that point in time. They were very wary themselves. So that was a big one, and it was a significant loss for us because at that point in time, we were struggling seriously to get the business off the ground. We were barely able to pay ourselves. So that was a hard one. And I tell you what, some of the things that we learned, first of all, is this: as a business person, believe in yourself, believe in your vision. You might not have all the technical competencies, but the truth is that you can't leave your dream for someone else to try and grow it for you. I mean, essentially what we did was to invest our dreams in someone else and expect him to carry the journey and the vision for us in that regard. So you have to believe in yourself enough so that at best you take the technical person with you and go for those presentations. Don't leave your vision in the hands of someone else until you have done the groundwork in terms of building capacity and building trust in the industry and your potential partners. The second thing is this: that it's important to try to align your value systems. Our reality actually is that even in the early days when we first met him, and we were a bit wary about his character, about some of the things that he said, some of the ideas that he proposed, but because we were fixated on what we saw on our own lack of competencies in that technical space, we overlooked a few things. Stick to your value systems. Make sure that when you bring people on board, you are mindful and pay attention to your instincts. Trust your instincts. If we had done that, I promise you that we'll never have hired him in the first place. Actually, we did that because of an emotional connection to his wife, who was a friend. The other thing that I want to say out of this experience that we learned is that you have to choose your battles and you have to know when to walk away. In this case, it had gotten to where we might have had to end up in court with him on this matter. But when we looked at it in truth, we realized that even for the people that signed him on, they must have realized that something was fundamentally wrong with the transactions in itself, but they went ahead anyway. And so it was a question of what their own ethics and value system was and whether they were the right partner for us. We then chose to walk away rather than fight a battle that we might not necessarily have wanted to win in the first place. And lastly, when you make mistakes in business, it's very important that you own your errors and then you move on. The reality is that God has a way of compensating, especially when values and integrity are involved. In our case, for instance, it turned out that this young man at the end of the day ended up practically duping that company all over again. They let him go, and look how God does things. Several years later, it turned out that some company he was trying to get a job at actually wrote to us for a reference. So go figure. So we took that experience, and it just allowed us to inform our approach to new partnerships in the course of the journey. The second thing I want to share with you is an experience that taught us that we also have to learn how to steward success properly. Now, for the first time, we got the opportunity to do a major project, major in the real sense of the word for us at that point in time, for one of the multinational companies. And of course, the project went through seamlessly, and ultimately our monies were paid as promised within the 60-day cycle. That was more money in the bank than we had ever had in the entire life of the business. So I think we kind of went a bit overboard. We decided suddenly that we needed to have 5 more marketers so that they could get more jobs. And so we hired these 5 young ladies, and we decided that it was important for them to have cars. And so we bought them all cars. We decided that we needed to move office, so we did just that. We decided things that were absolutely all entirely non-income generating. And of course, before you knew it, we didn't quite have a fraction of those resources anywhere else. What did we learn out of this? Because I can tell you that at some point, I remember one of the marketers, the vehicle was assigned to be used for something else, and she refused to take public transport because she was so used to driving her own air-conditioned car. So we had literally spoiled our people in the process. What were the learnings from there? First is this: as a business, you are in business to create value. What that means is that every time you have a good profit, an abnormal profit, whatever, the onus is on you to think through what are the most expedient needs that the business has and deploy those resources only as required based on expediency. Otherwise, invest your resources back in the business. Invest them in places where you can create value. It's important, no matter how small your business is, that you begin to think about treasury operations. I imagine today, if we had invested those funds, for instance, in dollars that far back, I mean, it would have been a significant addition to us today, given what is happening in the market several years later. It's important to steward success properly. Think through at every point in time what your objectives are as a business, and be sure that an inflow or a sudden good performance doesn't cause you to go out of alignment with the diligent pursuit of step-by-step growth that you have been doing all across the years. That was a hard knock for us, and I tell you that beyond that experience, money management took on a very different set of dynamics within our business. So the last mistake I want to share with you today is this. You know, in the course of building your business, what tends to happen at the beginning is that you're going to find yourself employing people based on what you can afford to pay. And many times you may not be focused on their competencies, which is, of course, one of the early phase mistakes that a lot of us make in business. The challenge, though, is that as we, the business owners, do the grind to up-level the business, a time comes when some of your people cannot cross over that Rubicon of the next level of upgrade of the business. Some people cannot even buy into the larger vision that you have for your business. But many times we tend to hold on to some people for very emotional reasons. I can tell you that over the course of our business, many times we've held on to people who were suboptimal performers simply because we liked them. And simply because we kept having an expectation that things would change. We put them on continuous performance improvement plans. We put them on productivity trainings. We attached coaches and mentors to us. And to be fair, some of them did up level. But for those who didn't, we just found it hard to let go. Ultimately, what happens is that those kinds of people in your system, they drag back every other person who is trying to make progress. You can imagine in a department where everybody's operating at an 80-90%, that one single person who is operating at 30% has the capacity to derail all the output and productivity of that unit. And what happens ultimately is that you are forced or constrained by circumstances ultimately to let them go. And you never get called good for having kept them much longer than the business really needed to. What we've learned in this process is this. 1, hire very slowly, hire carefully, hire for competence, hire for attitude, and hire for capacity to grow. The other thing then also is to fire very quickly. And this is not you being mean. Business demands you to be dispassionate to some degree so that you can do what is in the best interest for the organization to maintain its going concern status. And if you think about it, what tends to happen is that you actually steal from those people, in the sense that the time they would have better used to go and find some other productive activity, some other job, start some other business, by holding them back, you actually keep them out of those opportunities for a longer period, which in a sense is unfair. And funny enough, the longer they stay in your business, we found that even those that we ultimately had to let go had done a lot of damage in the system, and we had to do a lot of culture rebuilding in the process. So I've seen this happen so many times in my business, even as recently as a few years ago, and it's one of the mistakes that I would constantly counsel now. It's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you don't love people. Always hire for capacity. And when you do everything in your power to build the capacity of the people on your team and it's just not working for different reasons, make the right call for your business. So that's it today. 3 things that I thought I would share. Mistakes that I've made, mistakes that have cost me money, have cost me time, have cost me productivity, has cost me even the loyalty of some of my people. And here we are today. We're still trudging along, still trying to do great work. It's never perfect. Don't give up on yourself. Like I said earlier, when you make these mistakes, learn from them. Engage with other people. Hear their own, assessments of their own journey and see what you can take to help you to just reduce your own learning curves. I hope this was useful today, and I look forward to having another conversation with you soon enough. Take care.